Well, I mean, I had a question that came out of What's Liberal about privilege. You make a point in there that as a white man, you're able to say certain things in the classroom that a man of color or a woman of any hue wouldn't be able to get away with. And so how do you deal with that? Do you, I mean, do
I say so. I mean, this is what, I've just been witnessing one of the periodic vicious blog spats in the feminist blogosphere about the status of privilege, and I'm now convinced, and I've actually mentioned this to my class in fall, that the concept is overextended and almost useless at this point. On top of which, there's nothing to do about that kind of white privilege except just, call it by what it is. You don't get rid of it by acknowledging it. I just want to, in this case, to remind both students and, in some cases, like department heads and administrators, that the conditions under which people other than myself work provide them with very different kinds of rhetorical opportunities and occasions, to use that phrase. As I was writing the essay that became the beginning of What's Liberal, there was a Latino woman at Penn State who was just being, practically threatened by a white guy about my size. And that is a completely different dynamic than me
Which
being
is to say quite large, listeners.
Yes. If you could see me now, you would be trembling. No, for me to be challenged by a young, slight Latino woman, let's make her slight and drive home the point, completely different dynamic. And there's a certain sense in which I do not need as much protecting, either from, the likes of Horowitz, or I'd be David Horowitz, or from students, whereas there are certain people who, by virtue of their social position, their tint, their gender, whatever, are in a different kind of position. I don't think I actually use the whole white male hockey playing privilege thing to say, in other words, it's not as if I say all the things that Ward Churchill wishes he could but won't, right? I don't serve as the id in that way.
That must be a small category.
That's what I was thinking. It's got to be done, though, right? No, I don't want to give the impression that I, say things other faculty can't say. The really dispositive thing there, of course, is tenure. I say things untenured faculty and adjuncts and instructors can't say. Or I explore topics that they might be loath to explore for fear of getting a bunch of lousy student evaluations and not being renewed next year. But no, when you throw in the race-gender mix, it's quite clear that as one woman of color, actually a South Asian woman, reminded me a couple of months ago when I did one of these workshops on liberal bias. She walks into the classroom, everyone simply assumes that either she's some post-colonial, anti-imperialist, something, feminist, whatever. And that, just to get some sort of cognitive frisson going, she'll speak up in favor of the Brits or something. No, I mean, just to disrupt, yeah, it's a good thing. They gave us roads, like the Monty Python. And otherwise, students will, as she says, students will have me pigeonholed at the end of 15 seconds. And I find that completely vexing. With me, they're not sure what they get, and that's one of the privileges of occupying the default position. No one knows till you open your mouth. Occasionally, I will say, especially if we're doing we did Nella Larson's novel Passing, or autobiography of an ex-colored man. I will tell them I'm gay, just to see if anyone takes it for a while. And before holding up my ring finger, speak, look, sanctioned by the state, approved, heterosexual. But of course, you wouldn't know. You just assumed. Well, there's a little point about what people assume when you walk in the room.
Are the rules different? I mean, you started the answer with the blogosphere. Was it the Brown Femme Power? Was it Amanda Marcotti, etc.? Well,
yeah.
We don't need to get into that.
No, we don't need to get into that.
The specifics of that, I think, are...
There was a question of privilege. Let me say something else about this. Because Marcotte's first book cover, which featured it's a jungle out there, so it featured a gorilla carrying off it was retro art. And Amanda puts this up and says, I love it, it knocks my socks off. And I, liked it at first too. I thought, this is funny. And then some people said, this could be racist. And I thought it was, it has a racist history. But I mean, how does that affect the book cover? I mean, I just don't see, there's an argument here about going on about context and, the usual, and does an image signify in and of itself. But it was when people started deploying the privilege claim that I found there was an odd moment here. In other words, those of us who looked at the cover and didn't immediately think racism did so, the charge was, out of white privilege. This is a strange argument. This makes people who don't associate gorillas with black men somehow more racist than people who do, or at least equally racist.
I always think of that poster from World War I when it's the German gorilla.
The German gorilla, that actually, by the end of that, like
yeah.
8,000 common thread,
Yeah.
every gorilla ever depicted, was, I found...
I confess I didn't read the thread.
Oh, no, it went on for a week, and these things are, if I weren't friends with her in real space, I wouldn't have bothered. But also because, these are young people with blogs, they get their first book deal, and it's kind of strange, their relation to print culture. It's sort of dismissive.
I was going to ask you.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, no, my question was...
Dismissive and hopeful at the same time, or aspirational. Right?
So this is the question I have about rhetorics, and whether A, the rules are different in the blogosphere, and B, what happens when the bloggers start being invited into the, I don't even know, either the stultified or rarefied, who knows what it is, the older world, antiquated, whatever you want, of print culture, which ostensibly they've killed, or they are in the process of killing.
They still aspire to it. No
or I don't know whether they aspire to it or not, but again, there are questions of rhetorics and power that are going on here, and so Iglesias has his new book out, and
I like the ad for it. Can he go long? Right? Can he write something more than a paragraph? Right. Yeah. It strikes me that very few people work readily, present company accepted, in both media.
I mean, I guess, I don't know, he and I have totally different styles of blogging. I shouldn't say totally different, but very, in that I handle that issue and the rhetorical move that it requires just by being endlessly tongue-in-cheek. And so if I screw up, which I do often, I say, well, what do you expect? I'm a clown. And whereas in my scholarship, I could never, it's not even something you try.
Right.
Because there's no room for that at all.
But I do think the larger issue here about what kind of utterance a claim on a blog is a really interesting question, especially if it's made by one of us. I mean, are we just horsing around in the basement with a hobby?
This is a phase. I mean, what you're talking about now is sort of a phase of the public intellectual question, the big public intellectual question, right? I mean, how much are you on your scholarly oath when you're wearing your public intellectual hat? Can you tell us a bit about how you reckoned with the public intellectual question there?
Oh.
I mean, because, the assumption is, if I had world enough and time, I would write you a 500-page monograph on this with footnotes and the scholarly bibliography.
But this margin is too small to contain.
That's right, it's margin is too small. But I have 800 words on an op-ed page. So I'm going to do some violence to the sophistication of my knowledge. How do you deal with that?
I think it's much easier dealing with it on blogs. When I started taking the blog out from more of a spin, when I realized I could do it, I realized you didn't have to go by the op-ed format. And that if you had some dedicated readers, or if some faith the thing would circulate in URLs and be passed around. I'm thinking when I wrote about a 2,000 word thing. No, Theory Tuesday. The thing most recently about the Obama's and Clinton's disability policy.
Oh yeah.
Very dry stuff. Not hardly got any attention at all at TPM Cafe. But I figured, but people who are interested will circulate this. It'll have the status of a quasi-print kind of thing because it'll go around to people working on disability. And I think that's one of the first things I was hopeful about blogs, that it does break the 800, 900 word format. But again, the premise behind the question still remains, right? Like, even in 2,000 or 3,000 words, you haven't written a 500-page manuscript that has been fully vetted and cross-checked. And I think, I'm not sure yet what I think about that. As you talk about thinking, this is in flux. I really thought at first this was just public intellectual on holiday. And once I think, blogs themselves had more of a critical mass and became populated with more people with day jobs, like ours, or James Walcott, or people who are also print mavens, it actually did qualitatively change what kind of things blogs were, so that in some cases they subjected to the same kind of scrutiny, only faster.